Trump reverts to usual impulses by stoking tensions over Floyd protests. Washington. If President Donald Trump's initial response to the police killing of an unarmed black man in Minnesota surprised some as uncharacteristically measured, his threat of violent police retaliation and military intervention as protests raged thrust him more squarely into a familiar position as racial instigator and defender of law enforcement. As protests in Minneapolis continue and unrest foments in other American cities, the situation will pose another test of leadership for a president whose actions on race and policing have more traditionally fallen in the Blue Lives Matter camp than the black ones. The tweets, which appeared while images of fires and destruction aired on cable news late into the evening on Thursday, were slapped with a warning by Twitter for violating its rules against glorifying violence. In them, Trump seemed to imply protesters could be shot and the U.S. military could become involved if violence continued in the city, which has been gripped with unrest after disturbing video emerged of a white police officer pinning a black man to the street by his neck as he gasped for breath. The man, George Floyd, died while in police custody. "These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen," Trump wrote on his personal account. "Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty and we will assume control, but when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Thank you." The White House, defying Twitter's objection, later tweeted the same remark on its official account. The message marked a distinct return to form for the president, whose initial response to the situation, calling the video shocking and demanding justice, was itself markedly different from how he had approached instances of police brutality in the past. Even the language in his tweet seemed to harken back to tough-on-crime heavy-handedness that is now under scrutiny for disproportionately affecting men of color. "I've let the word filter down that when the looting starts, the shooting starts," said Miami Police Chief Walter Headley in 1967 as he announced a campaign against crime that included using dogs, guns and a stop-and-frisk policy. "We don't mind being accused of police brutality," Headley said in the news conference, according to an article from the period in the New York Times. Since then, tactics like stop and frisk have been re-examined for their implicit racial bias. Using tactics like aggressive hold positions on arrestees have been scrutinized for their safety after a number of deaths. But Trump has spoken out rarely on the issue, and during the first 3 years of his presidency, was more likely to side with law enforcement than with the minority communities that have protested their tactics. He called for a return of stop and frisk in 2018, telling police chiefs at a convention he was instructing his Justice Department to work toward reinstating it in Chicago, where its use had been curtailed. "Got to be properly applied, but stop and frisk works," he said then. At other moments, Trump has appeared to endorse tactics by police that might harm people in custody, including failing to protect an arrestee's head when putting them into a squad car. "When you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand over," Trump said in a speech to law enforcement officers in 2017, mimicking the action. "I said, you can take the hand away, okay?" He spoke out forcefully against NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, whose kneeling protest during the playing of the national anthem was meant to shine a spotlight on racial injustice and harsh police tactics. Trump's vice president, Mike Pence, even stormed out of an Indianapolis Colts game when some players kneeled during the anthem. Trump declined to comment on certain cases of white-on-black killing, including the shooting death of Stephon Clark in California at the hands of police. He hasn't commented on the 2014 killing of Eric Garner, whose last words, "I can't breathe," came as police placed him in a chokehold. Instead, Trump has been more likely to mock that phrase, which has been used by Black Lives Matter protesters ever since. In 2016, he made fun of Mitt Romney by bringing his hands to his neck and shouting "I can't breathe" to illustrate Romney choking in the 2012 presidential election. Before he was elected, Trump had a long history of stoking racial controversies, including his attempts to undermine President Barack Obama's legitimacy as president by claiming he was born outside the United States. In 1989, he sided with police in the case of the Central Park Five, a group of young men of color who were wrongfully convicted of raping a jogger. Asked last year by a reporter if he would apologize for his actions surrounding the case, he took out full-page newspaper ads calling for the death penalty that read, "Bring back the death penalty. Bring back our police." Trump instead asked why the topic was relevant. "Why do you bring that question up now? It's an interesting time to bring it up. You have people on both sides of that. They admitted their guilt, he said. The history of either silence or reflexive support for police seemed to be shifting this month when Trump weighed in on 2 new cases of white-on-black violence in Georgia and Minnesota. He called the death of Ahmaud Arbery, who was shot by a white man while jogging in February, a heartbreaking thing. His Justice Department is investigating the killing as a federal hate crime, though Trump has held out the possibility that something that we didn't see on tape could explain the killing. Trump was briefed on the Floyd case Thursday afternoon by Attorney General William Barr and was very upset when he saw the video, according to his press secretary. Many of Trump's allies in conservative media echoed Trump's call for justice in the case. The shift in tone coincided with Trump's campaign effort to peel off black voters from Democrats, hoping to convince them Trump is a better candidate than Vice President Joe Biden, who caused controversy last week when he told a radio host that African-American Trump supporters ain't black. Biden's own history on race and policing is fraught. He supported crime bills in the 1980s and 1990s that led to a spike in incarcerated black men. But he maintains an overwhelming lead among black voters and has frequently backed civil rights legislation. Click subscribe to receive the latest news.